I have never been so deeply offended by another content creator in my life.
240, EverQuest 3. The footage shown is not EverQuest 3 because EverQuest 3 doesn't yet exist. Announced in 2023 and expected in 2028, the sequel to one of the most important MMOs ever is on this list because of hype and speculation. So please, stop putting games which don't exist yet on top 10 MMO lists.
So, this tier list is designed just to upset Josh Strife Hayes. And I guess by extension the entire MMO community, because you might be angry by the end of it too. This is the ultimate MMO tier list for games that do not exist. But you might actually learn a thing or two about some games that may or may not be coming in the future in a video where the premise, admittedly, is a little bit, well, let's just say, cheeky. We've all seen the MMORPG tier list. Sometimes it's a simple article or a live stream video converted into a YouTube video with terrible audio. Sometimes you spend 2 months compiling the ultimate MMO tier list that people can put on their second monitor while playing the same MMO they played for the past 20 years, nodding along, calling every game that comes up shit, and then cursing Henry Cavill for not putting their favorite MMO at number 1. Sometimes you do things a little differently. But the good thing is, the really good thing is I have absolutely no bias at all. Not even a little bit of bias. Some might even say that I'm so completely above bias that my critiques are above reproach, that I am completely and utterly objective in my rankings. The methodology for this list, this totally not scientific list of MMORPGs stacked in tiers, is essentially the 15 seconds that I took to research all of these games and put them in a list and make some cheeky jokes about each one. All basically me haphazardly putting them in a list based on their potential, what they could be if they actually launch. And I guess in a sense, if they will, or if there's even a chance of it. Games cannot currently exist in any form on this list. That would defeat its whole purpose. So you won't see any games that are currently in testing, any ones that have open availability or NDAs that are lifted. No Ashes of Creation, no Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, no Monsters and Memories on this list. Those games you can actually play. Not even Star Citizen and its 700 million game that just launched a 4.0 update. And if you're sitting there thinking, isn't this just a silly thing that doesn't need to actually be made, and it doesn't have any real relevance, and it won't actually add anything to the scientific discourse of MMO tier lists? Well, the answer is yes. Like all MMO tier lists, yes, it's actually just opinion. It's just a bunch of opinion, because that's what they all are. Liking or not liking games, any games, including MMORPGs, will always be subjective, not objective. It is your opinion. And believe it or not, my opinion as a content creator doesn't outweigh any of your opinions. I'm just here to make myself look silly for you, so hopefully you feel a little bit entertained when we talk about the genre that we all love. So that's the point of the video. Entertainment. And if you want, just to mess up future videos of scientific tier list making, I've actually included the tier list down below so you can all make the tier list as well, and I encourage content creators to make their own. Let's start with a spicy one. Chronicles of Illyria is a persistent world MMORPG where you can grow old and die, which is fitting because more likely than not, that's what the backers of the game will do before it ever releases. The poster child of the failed Kickstarter MMO, Chronicles of Elyria was subjected to a class action lawsuit for not delivering on its promises and closing its studio. That lawsuit was dismissed, and the game is on an indefinite hiatus, but as recently as December 2024, the game is definitely, of course, totally, 100% still in development. At least that's what Soulbound Studio says, though we can't see it because there's an NDA. Now, when I was making this tier list, I saw like I had the S, the A, the B, the C, and the D tier. But when I added Chronicles of Elyria, well, there was one tier I had to add. I knew I had to add just for this one. It's the what the fuck tier. And so Chronicles of Elyria will go right there in our what the fuck tier. But why is this game specifically on this list of MMOs that do not exist? Well, to figure that out, we've got to refer to our chart. Oh, right, there's no chart because I just made this shit up myself. I didn't do any research. Go watch Josh Drive Say's videos. Our next game is the Warhammer MMO, under development by Jackalifted Games with no certainty whether it's Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Fantasy, or if it will even have PvP, or it will be a pay-to-win nightmare given that it's being financially backed by NetEase. The game is held by Jack Emmert, whose credits include games like DC Universe Online, Star Trek Online, City of Heroes, and Neverwinter Online. Hang on, I'm getting a call. Okay, so I'm getting told that because of that connection to Neverwinter Online, Josh Drive Hayes will not be allowed anywhere near this game, even if it's 40k, because of a blistering takedown of the Neverwinter monetization that Josh Drive Hayes started his content career with. Oh, that's rough. Oops. What I'm being told instead is that they will be finding Sawman UK, the dog, yes, the British dog, to replace him in that way.
Oh hi, Sawman here, and I'm doing a Temu impersonation of Josh Drive Hayes, or Josh Drive Hayes doing a Wish version of Henry Cavill. I like MMOs and stuff. Sorry, Josh.
For Warhammer, we've got to put them very firmly in the C tier. The reason why it's in the C tier is because we honestly don't know enough about it. There are more questions about this game than answers. And yes, it is heavily being hinted at. It is being basically broadcast that this probably is going to be a Warhammer 40k MMO, but we don't have any strict 100% confirmation. So not even knowing which IP they're gonna go with is a really big start to, you know what, we're putting it in the D tier. We don't even know. We don't know what this is going to be. We just know it's going to be on PC. We know that it's coming from Jack Emmert, and it's going to be the studio's first MMORPG, and it's being backed by NetEase, and it has been announced. So surely our next game will have much more information to it, right? What happens when you combine the company that famously told everyone the quiet part out loud and said that all the layoffs they were doing were just to protect investor fifis, and then the other company that thought Pirates of the Caribbean was a great inspiration for swimming in an MMO that lacked any sense of identity or story, so they spent the next 3 years doing that and then eventually added in swimming while also telling everybody that, hey, it's actually not an MMO anymore, it's an action RPG. You get a take at one of the biggest IPs ever made. Something that'll probably result in a whole lot of nerd rage, most likely because this is the second attempt at an already once canceled Lord of the Rings MMORPG. Not talking about Lord of the Rings Online, that one is still going on. I'm talking about Amazon has tried twice now to make a Lord of the Rings Online MMORPG. The first one fell through because Tencent didn't want to do things, and this one, well, Amazon's Lord of the Rings MMO won't be burdened this time with the same fractured IP rights it's had in the past, as Embracer has more complete rights for games for Lord of the Rings, but an Amazon game studio have a battle-wounded studio that's seen the downside of making MMOs and even publishing them, even having games that have canceled in their publication, like Blue Protocol. while publishing other games like Throne and Liberty and Lost Ark, which had splashes but didn't have any kind of staying power. And then of course there's New World, the game they actually made, demonstrating both a latent desire for new MMORPGs from the MMORPG player base, as well as the fickle nature of the player base, especially when your game is a solid C-tier MMO that doesn't know if it wants to be a PvE MMO, a PvP MMO, or a survival game. Only time will tell what happens with Amazon's second bite at the apple after a previous deal with Tencent for the Lord of the Rings MMO fell through, and given the track record of the MMOs made by Amazon Game Studios, it only feels right to put it in a solid C tier. However, Embracer Group said that the C tier was completely redundant, so it's been laid down to the D tier based on that merger. I'm heard that the D tier, which may or may not stand for dick, it'll improve investor returns, so I think they're going to be happy with this regardless. Our next game asks the question, instead of one pretty overly monetized MMO, how about two? Project E was announced in the lead up to Throne and Liberty's release, and we honestly don't know that much about it. In all honesty, it's entirely possible that it won't even end up being an MMO, if anything at all, given NCSoft's restructuring. Project E is supposed to be a companion game to Throne and Liberty, a different area of the world, which really just sounds like an expansion. But it hasn't really been billed that way, and instead it's in this kind of nebulous territory of, what is it? Now, I want to just put this in the what the f tier alongside Chronicles of Elyria, but that feels mean because it's not the same as what Chronicles of Elyria has been doing, so I think we just need to create a new tier. And in this new tier, I think there's only one real way that we can really put this in. It's just question marks. This tier is just question marks. So we're just gonna take Project E, put it smack dab right there in the tier. Our next game, well, it's an interesting one. What happens when you get tired of trying to make the Riot MMO happen? Well, apparently you strike out to make your own MMO, like Bender. Ghostcrawler of former World of Warcraft and Riot fame created a new studio with the backing of NetEase. Yes, it is also funded by NetEase, like Jackalyptic Games' Warhammer title. Can we cling to Marvel Rivals being a fun game that's not crazily monetized because that's also from NetEase? Can we cling to that for hope for these games? We gotta cling to that one. But those same concerns apply here. But one of the bigger concerns around Project Ghost has actually been around what they've shown so far and what they're talking about with the game. It is still very, very early in development, but the game has been talked about in different zones, blue zones and red zones. And the players will go into different play styles in these zones. Red zones are essentially the MMORPG zones that you're used to. The social hubs and the areas that are shared with the bespoke, handcrafted maps, dungeons, raids, world bosses, etc. Blue zones, on the other hand, are a sort of instance version that you can explore with a small group of friends to quest, gather resources, and battle. A place where the environment reacts to you and the map changes every time you go into the zones. Which, to be honest, just kind of sounds like the evolution of EverQuest's Lost Dungeons and Norrath Dungeons. Blue zone enemies and resources remain the same, but the map itself will change. These zones have made many start to consider Project Ghost to potentially be a lobby-based MMO. Think Vindictus, but in a recent interview, Greg Street, aka Ghostcrawler, pushed back on that, saying, quote, "The gameplay is just as far along as the art is, meaning there are parts that are representative and parts that are totally stand-in. We are not going to have portals that you jump through and see a loading bar. We certainly won't ship like that." This is the first game on the list that I'm actually cautiously optimistic about. A game that if they aren't like crazily monetized might be interesting. Even if it's a lobby-based game like Vindictus, it can still be fun. I'm hopeful that it won't be a lobby-based game, and this is really just a miscommunication and part of just how they're testing the game now, and it'll be a full world map, and you'll get to go into these different areas, and these blue zones are more like just these, like, you know, instances essentially for players to go into with their friends and do basically an instance dungeon run like Lost Dungeons and Norrath in EverQuest. But it remains to be seen. And again, we're still really early in testing, and most things that we've seen, especially in this B-roll, are all just placeholders. Because this may or may not be a lobby-based game, because we don't know what the monetization is going to be like, and because even though Ghostcrawler is known in the MMO space, it's still an unproven studio, we're going to dump this somewhere, let's just say in the C tier, right up there. After all, you know, Vindictus was pretty cool. You could like take down entire ice caverns. The combat was a lot of fun. The next MMO we're adding to this list, I think we're technically not supposed to know about. It's the Horizon MMO, being developed by NCSoft and Sony. That's right, Sony, which got rid of their online division when they sold off to Columbus Nova and dropped EverQuest MMOs, DCU Online, PlanetSide, Vanguard, basically all the MMOs people liked, and just said, we don't like that stuff anymore and we're going to cancel all this stuff. Landmark too. Well, they're trying again with Horizon MMO. They're swapping out dragons for metal dinosaurs. And they're doing it with a company that, at least in the past, has made decent MMOs, like Lineage 2, or maybe Project E. We don't know for sure. But this game hasn't really been officially fully announced yet, and as with Project E, financial troubles at NCSoft are a concern whether this game will ever see the light of day. Not to mention the fact that Throne and Liberty, the game that they most recently launched, went through so many iterations it took them 12 years to launch it. Although I will say that NCSoft has seemingly been better when they're not the sole party responsible for the MMO. Look no further than ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2, or potentially Guild Wars 3, which I probably should have put on this list as well. For this one we're gonna put it right here in the D tier. But our next MMO, thankfully, amazingly, we know everything about it. Or nothing. I think we know nothing about it. It's the Riot MMO. It's probably closer to nothing. The fabled Riot MMO has been set on the horizon of the genre for what feels like an eternity, in large part because, well, it's kind of everyone's dream. They've been able to project whatever they want onto this MMO because we don't know that much. It's the bucket every MMO player has poured their hopes into, because not only is that nebulous enough to do so, but it's coming from Riot, a shockingly successful company despite only releasing a handful of games. Games that I'm scared to go play because I got yelled at once in a League of Legends game. I'm sensitive. There have been troves of videos released on the potential of this MMO, reading the tea leaves, trying to find out about just about anything they could. And unfortunately, where that's led is to a restart. The Riot MMO, as it wasn't compelling enough, so they've begun anew with the promise to go quiet. The game wasn't fun is the sort of message we've heard from other MMOs in the past that ended up never seeing the light of day, like EverQuest Next and Project Titan from Blizzard, or Blizzard's survival MMO. The uncertain fate of the most hyped upcoming MMO, one that lost Greg Street, Ghostcrawler, who went on to put a new MMO on this list, one that has had to restart after years of development, and one that has all the money and willpower to make a successful MMO, the golden opportunity for the genre. Well, I think it shows that all of these games, until they're at the very least in a playable state, or even more accurately perhaps, released, they're built on a house of sand. As are all games, but perhaps MMOs themselves are a bit more prone to toppling under the weight of their own expectations. It's just something to think about, that this game, the Riot MMO, which has been the hope of so many players for so long, is still uncertain, even more so now than it has been in the past. So let's put it right next to Ghosts MMO in the C tier, but I think we got to move it this way. That's like the only way we should do this. But you know what? Screw all that negativity, right? Because this next one I'm so hyped about, so excited about, that, you know, it's finally an MMO. It's finally one that we can put all the way up in the S tier. Like I don't even need to say much about this. It's EverQuest 3. We know what's gonna happen here. We know where this MMO is going. It's going straight up to the... Why won't it's not sticking? Why won't it stay there? Every time no matter what I do, it's why is it in C tier? I didn't put it there. I guess, in a sense, it's because it's still in ideation. It is also still on that castle of sand. We've heard for over a year now that it's on the way, that they're working on it. But even Darkpaw has been a bit cagey. When you first heard about it in the investor document, well, it was more like if we announced it, it would be day one news. It did end up being day one news, at least for me. I covered it, and then later in the year, we found out that yeah, they were looking at resources. They were starting their hiring process, and even more recently, we heard that it's probably leaning towards a reboot, which does fit with what they were talking about of trying to not reinvent the wheel with EverQuest, kind of the way that Elden Ring didn't really reinvest the Dark Souls formula. It's also living in the shadow of the missteps that nearly killed the entire IP. EverQuest Next, an overly ambitious title that tried to throw away much of what made EverQuest itself great, including its own world. An EverQuest Landmark, the salvaged ruin of a game that somehow made digging a hole fun, that was unceremoniously killed off during the darkest times of the developer's history, under the leadership of Columbus Nova, before it is ungraciously sold off to another company amidst potential scandal. That all leads to EverQuest 3 being a concern, but a hyped up concern. One that fans of EverQuest, especially the IP of EverQuest, have been waiting for what feels like over a decade. That we wanted with EverQuest Next, even though EverQuest Next was promising such a different experience. We were still excited about it. And that's why EverQuest 3 has been an idea of players for so long, kind of like a World of Warcraft 2 would be. World of Warcraft, though, on the other hand, has kind of aged a bit more gracefully than EverQuest has. Things like UI changes, graphic updates, and having Season of Discovery, having Classic WoW, all those things have led to World of Warcraft being able to prolong while also kind of maintaining itself as a more modern MMORPG at the same time. EverQuest has also made some of those changes. They started the progression server thing all the way back in 2006. But the other parts, like especially like the UI, for example, have really started to age. And so it's kind of time for EverQuest to move on. The time is kind of now. But there's concerns beyond that. There's concerns that Daybreak doesn't have the time or money any longer to make a genre-defining MMO, the way that Variant Interactive did. There's concerns from how Daybreak has actually been dabbling with some pretty gnarly monetization over on EverQuest 2. Well, also some good things with EverQuest 2 with their Origin server, which did the opposite of those gnarly monetization things. It's just one of those things that we just kind of have to wait and see. But hang on, wait a second. Let me pull this up here real quick. Have you noticed something? In this tier list, nothing's above a C. Why the hell isn't anything above a C? I thought I put some games in here that I was sure it would make in the top tiers. Not even EverQuest. It's because none of them exist at all. If I've learned anything from not just playing MMOs, but actually covering them over the last few years, it's this. Creating an MMO is hard, very hard. It's also a genre that has been largely abandoned by those that have money to make them, or they've been so plagued by awful monetization that we yearn for the emotions we got from older MMOs. MMOs that were made during a rush to capitalize on a new burgeoning internet without the communication tools we have today. The MMOs that became the chat rooms, the MMOs that became the social experience for players to interact with each other. Something that you can do now on Discord or on WhatsApp or whatever the hell else. Money now goes into mobile games, much easier to make, much more profitable. Live service games, which are probably about as hit or miss as an MMO, but also much easier to make. Or smaller single player games or co-ops. You're probably more likely to get games now like an Enshrouded than an EverQuest, for example. Basically, what I've done here is try to give you a little bit of information on each of these upcoming MMORPGs while also driving home one major idea. We don't know a damn thing about any of them. It's too early. And there are major questions with each, and by this time next year or the year after, many of these games could be cancelled. It doesn't matter if the game is a crowdfunded MMO or backed by a AAA publisher. Games in these stages, these early stages, are more fragile than my feelings. And I realize that's the second time I've joked about my feelings in this video, so maybe I need to talk to my therapist. With every dose of hype, we need to maintain some realistic expectations, and that's on people like myself as well. So this, in a sense, is also a bit of a mea culpa that I need to be a bit more guarded in my hype for games that don't quite exist yet. Something to kind of keep and maintain realistic expectations. That doesn't mean that I think it's wrong to hope. I think hope is a good thing. I think hope in anything, hope for games that you really want to play, hope for your life, hope in general, is a good positive thing. But then I think some realistic expectations alongside that hope are a good way to help even it out a little bit. But this was just a tongue-in-cheek tier list. If you want to see an actual really well done tier list, an MMO tier list that takes everything from everybody and has a really powerful message at the end, a video that's really worth putting onto your second monitor and just listening to for an hour, almost 2 hours of really interesting things about the MMORPG genre. Bring up games that you may have forgotten existed, completely forgotten existed. Definitely go check out this MMORPG, Ultimate MMORPG tier list from Josh Drive Hayes. And Josh, if you're watching this at all, at least I didn't include Dota or League of Legends in this list. But also sorry for messing up the eventual Ultimate tier list number 2 that you make when you find that you have, 3 months to spare to make another one. My name is Ray Rifflin. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.